Hello and welcome to our third Richmond and Teddington Wine Society's video tasting. And this month we focus on the classic wines of France. Now, I realise that it is impossible to do justice to French wines in one event, but I will taste through a broad spectrum of grapes, styles and regions, and thus give an overview of some of the best known names in this, the most famous of wine producing countries. For those of you that have watched and participated with the previous videos, then you'll know the ropes. But for those of you tuning in for the first time, may I extend the warmest of welcomes and hope you enjoy this hitherto unexplored format of wine tasting. Remember, you can press pause at any time and indeed watch the video over a series of hours, days, or even weeks. As we're covering a range of different regions this month, I'll be giving a slightly extended overview before each wine, rather than a regional summary. So at this point, you should have your wine glasses ready, the first wine poured, the Sancerre, tasting notes and sheets at the ready. If not, pause now and get ready.
Sancerre is located at the eastern edge of the Loire Valley's main vineyard area. It is closer to Chablis than it is to Muscadet in the most western part. In the village of Crézancy, 7 kilometres west of Sancerre, the Sautereau family has been producing wine for 9 generations. Their 22 hectares of vineyards are located in a variety of different areas and thus give current family incumbent, David Sautereau, a range of soils to work with and allow more complex and varied flavours in his wines. 2018 was a vintage shaped by extraordinary extremes of weather, ranging from record levels of spring rainfall to summer heat waves. The grapes were harvested at optimum ripeness across the whole vineyard, and the quality and quantity was outstanding across the region. The pressed grapes were fermented in stainless steel tanks at low temperatures in order to preserve the purity and aromatics of the fruit. To get an insight into the famous chalky limestone soils, just take a look at the Monts Damnés vineyard picture. It is this terroir that contributes so much to the sense of minerality in the Sancerre wines. Sancerre, the town, is situated 300 metres above sea level on a wonderful hilltop overlooking the Loire Valley, and from the town you can see the village of Chavignols, famous for its little crottin, rounds of goat's cheese. Before I talk about the cheese, I remember Chavignols as the place where Fliss and I experienced one of the best and worst meals of our lives in the space of 2 days. In a restaurant called, appropriately, Le Monts Damnés, we enjoyed a goat's cheese-inspired gastronomic spectacular, and in the other place, a gastronomic debacle. However, Crottin de Chavignols are the perfect match for Sancerre. Whether they are younger and more soft and delicate, or older and firmer, the freshness of the wine cuts through the distinctive goat's milk cheese.
Okay, so our first wine of the tasting is the Sancerre 2018 Domaine Sautereau. And first of all, quick look at colour. And as you can see, it's clear lemony gold in colour, fairly pale, as you might expect, 2018 vintage, barely a couple of years old, not even that. And it's all unoaked, so no wood treatment at all stainless steel fermentation, just a little bit of lees aging, 3 months before bottling. So absolutely classic sort of lemony gold colour. So let's move on to the nose. So give it a good swirl, break up that surface tension, release the aromas, and then give it a good sniff. And I think straight away you get a lovely crisp fruit, citrusy, a little bit of gooseberry maybe, some herbaceous notes, but I think often one compares Sauvignon Blanc, this is 100%, with Marlborough Sauvignon, which can be really intense, really pungent. This is elegant, this is restrained, but it still retains a lovely ripeness and a lovely intensity. 2018 was a great year, and this is really shaping up on the nose beautifully. So let's move on to the palate. Let's give it a good sloosh. And first of all, as you'd expect from any good Sancerre, a combination. Bone dry, but then there's lovely tingly acidity down the sides of your mouth. So it's refreshing, makes you want that other glass, that second glass, or even that third glass. And but then it fills the mouth. There's this sort of lovely sort of texture, lovely weight, and then a really, really long, consistent and persistent finish. Again, lovely sort of citrus fruit, lovely sort of bit of limestone notes, that sort of minerality really coming through. Now, from a food perspective, I'm going to start you off with a slightly challenging recipe in terms of sort of matching with wine and food, and I think this would be great with gazpacho. Now, I'm sure many of you weren't thinking gazpacho. Equally, it would go fantastic with all sorts of sort of fish dishes. But gazpacho comes out because you've got some quite sort of distinct flavours, and I think this has got the weight to marry quite harmoniously with that. So give it a try. Summer is coming, and I'm sure gazpacho will feature on a more than regular basis over the next few months. Cheese-wise, there can only be one thing with Sancerre, and that is their famous crottin de Chavignol. Now, Chavignol, a little village that you can see from the panoramic hilltop town of Sancerre as you look down, and Chavignol is the gastronomic centre of the universe for the famous little rounds of goat's cheese. Now, and the way that Sancerre really works is that lovely acidity just cuts through the intensity of the cheese. And with crottin, it's always worth experimenting with different ages of crottin. So I've got, first of all, this little soft one, younger one, a little bit fresher. Easily bite into it. Lovely sort of soft texture on the palate. It goes beautifully with Sancerre. But then, I asked a cheesemonger for a more mature crottin. They're smaller, harder, more crumbly, more difficult to bite into, and a completely different texture. And yet, Sancerre worked beautifully with it. So, that's Sancerre, Domaine Sautereau. At this point, this is your chance to pause before we move on to the next wine, which is the Chablis, or carry on drinking this, eat your cheese, have a little mouthful of gazpacho if you've got that already, and we'll crack on with the next tasting in just a moment.
Chablis is one of France's best-known white wines. It is the northernmost wine district of Burgundy and is situated about 16 kilometres east of Auxerre and 130 kilometres northwest of Dijon. Chablis wines are produced solely from the Chardonnay grape. The terroir is dominated by a mix of Kimmeridgian and Portland soils with chalky outcrops that extend from Sancerre. It is the Kimmeridgian soil vineyards with its high lime and fossil content where you'll find the best expressions of minerality-driven Chablis, whereas the Portland soil tends to give a fruitier, softer style. The Chablis we are tasting comes from the small 5-hectare estate of Sebastien Dampt. With predominantly 40 to 50-year-old vines in a range of plots, Sebastien is seen as a rising star and is part of a family dynasty that has been making wine for well over a century. The wines are all fermented in stainless steel and remain at the domain for 8 to 10 months prior to release. Like in Sancerre, 2018 was a great year for Chablis and will demonstrate the optimal combination of ripeness and minerality in the best examples. For the cheese pairing, I've opted for one of my favourites, Chaos. Chaos is a soft cheese made from cow's milk in the village of the same name, 45 kilometres northeast of Chablis. This cylindrical shaped cheese has a soft ripened, creamy and a little bit crumbly, non-elastic texture. Surrounded by a white velvety rind, it develops intensity as it matures and becomes wonderfully tangy and concentrated. The fresh acidity of the Chablis will cut through and marry harmoniously.
Our second wine of the tasting is the 2018 Chablis from Sebastien Dampt. Now, Chablis, famous name, famous town, and I think that once again, looking first of all at the colour, it's again lemony gold, a little bit darker perhaps than the Sancerre, but what we have here in this time is 100% Chardonnay. Whereas the previous wine was 100% Sauvignon Blanc. So it's a great opportunity to compare and contrast, two very well-known grapes from about 100 kilometres apart. You've got Chablis, you've got Sancerre, you've also got the southern part of Champagne, which is what we call the famous Golden Triangle in France. But looking at the colour, we've say a little bit darker than Sancerre. Then nose-wise, and I think straight away you get that richness of the Chardonnay but it's it's citrusy. There's a richness. There's a texture about the nose. Still lots of minerality, and there's, to me, a little bit of hint of oiliness there as well. We've got the benefit of nearly 2 years coming up with the 2018 vintage, and then moving on to the palate. Lovely weight. Again, this richness, this hint of oiliness just starts to sort of pervade over the teeth, mouth and gums. And again, super length. I'm getting this sort of real concentration, long length, very persistent finish. And there's a lovely texture. It's a coating all over sort of the back of the throat. Very, very attractive, fantastic food wine. And I think for food, what comes across straight away for me, sea bass. Some pan-fried sea bass, just nestling on a little bed of leeks. Maybe a little hint of pesto just lurking there. And I think all those flavours would contrast nicely with sort of the weight of this wine and the intensity of the flavours. Cheese-wise, it's a no-brainer for me. There's a town called Chateau, which is 40-50 kilometres just to the north of Chablis, and produces this beautiful soft ripened cheese, cow's milk cheese, that will be absolutely perfect with this. Fortunately, I have some here. Rich creamy cheese, lovely acidity in the wine, cuts through it beautifully, and the sort of the taste of the cheese, taste of the wine harmonises absolutely perfectly. Really super combination. So, this is your chance. Carry on drinking the Chablis, eat a little bit more shores, tuck into sea bass if you haven't done so already, and we'll move on to the third wine.
Champagne hardly needs any introduction, and yet it remains a fascinating story. Given that the grapes barely ripen enough for normal winemaking, it was the creation of the bubbles combined with centuries of innovative marketing and high price maintenance that have resulted in a truly extraordinary global brand. Champagne Joseph Perrier has been run by the same family since 1888 and own 21 hectares in the heart of the region around the villages of Auvilliers and Cumières, and they farm on the basis of la lutte raisonnée, which endeavours to minimise the impact on the environment. Their Cuvée Royale is a fairly equal blend of the three grapes, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, and the wine typically spends 3 years on the lees in the cellar prior to release. It is a non-vintage blend, which means that a proportion of the wine is made up of production from previous years, which maintains a house style. This system evolved to ensure there was always wine to sell in poor years. My suggested cheese pairing is Langres. Langres is a cow's milk cheese that originated from the plateau of Langres in the region of the Champagne-Ardenne. Since 1919, the cheese has been granted AOC designation. Surrounded by a white Penicillium candidum rind and coloured by annatto, the central body is soft and crumbly and appears creamy. It is milder than a poisse, but slightly salty with a strong aroma. The taste gets more intense as the cheese ages, and it's a great match for champagne, as once again the acidity of the fizz combines beautifully with the richness. This is one of my all-time favourite cheese and wine pairings.
Our third wine is champagne, and it's the Cuvée Royale from Joseph Perrier. Now, before we start swirling it around, I think we need to analyse the colour in a little bit more depth than usual. As you can see, pale lemony gold, as you might expect, but I think it's worthy of the analysis of the fineness and persistency of the mousse, or how bubbly is it. And I'm looking at quite a good number, small, fine, persistent bubbles. And generally speaking, the longer the wine spends in the cool environment of the champagne cellars, the smaller the bubble is created. So lovely small, fine bubbles. Now, the reason that one should always look at the bubbles first before swirling it around, because once you swirl it around, then that messes up the bubbles, makes it a lot harder to actually sort of get a good idea of the mousse. So give it a good swirl, just like any other wine, and straight away, lovely clean, floral, nice sort of citrus fruit coming through, nicely appley, but with nice length, intensity on the nose. Very sort of fresh as well. Then let's give it a taste. Now, first sensation, tip of the tongue, as you might expect, it's a brut champagne, so it's dry. But then also, you need to analyse the feeling of the mousse on the palate. Some champagnes can really create this sort of real sort of foam. This feels nicely elegant, nicely understated. It's not too foamy, but there's a nice consistent sort of bubble on the palate. So lovely, lovely sort of weight as well. Lovely freshness, you know, a little hint of brioche, little hazelnut notes as well coming through on the palate. And again, lovely long finish. You know, it really does resolve. It goes on and on for a long time at the back of the palate. Now, just talk about cheese first of all with champagne. A lot of people don't think of cheese with champagne, but many of you who've been on my cheese courses will know that sparkling wines are surprisingly good. So the first cheese, or the only cheese I'm recommending right now, is from the region. It's the Langres, and it's a lovely cow's milk, again soft ripened, a little bit of washed rind. Beautifully creamy, real intensity, real sort of, it's a really weighty cheese, it's a distinctive cheese, really benefits from a bit of age, but the champagne just cuts through it really, really well. And it's that acidity that cuts through the richness and the creaminess of the cheese. As many of you know, Langres, Petit Langres, which is the smaller style of the cheese, one of my absolute all-time favourites. This works beautifully with it. Now, some of you also may have heard me recount this tale of some years ago as part of an AWE, Association of Wine Educators, study trip. We spent 4 days in the Champagne region with an important task, trying to understand how well does champagne go and pair with food. Anyway, after 4 days of exhaustive study over lunch and dinner, we came to the startling conclusion that champagne does go with food, and really quite well. So you know, people often don't think that champagne will work with food, but actually it's a great partner. Can almost match anything. You know, we tasted 6 or 7 champagnes at lunch, another 8 to 10 champagnes at dinner, with a variety of different courses, and we were amazed at how fabulous it all was. So in this instance, what I'm thinking, it's not too heavy a champagne. So the dish I would pair this with would be some roast chicken, a little bit of jus, some wild mushrooms, and just a little smattering of garlic mayonnaise. I think it would be absolutely super, absolutely perfect with this. So cheers, champagne. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next wine. So this is the opportunity to pause now, keep on drinking the wine, have a nibble of cheese, and we'll now press on with the next tasting.
Fleurie is one of the best-known appellations in the Beaujolais region. Beginning just a few kilometres to the south of the town of Mâcon, in contrast to the predominantly white wines of the Mâconnais, 98% of the Beaujolais region production is red. Fleurie is made from the Gamay grape, which has unfortunately acquired a reputation that is associated with the Beaujolais Nouveau. This is a shame, because Fleurie, just like other well-known wines of the region, Morgon, Chérubes, Moulin-à-Vent and Juliennes, can be really serious, well-made wines that offer a refreshing alternative to the oceans of Cabernet, Merlot and Shiraz that abound. Fortunately, perceptions are slowly changing, as our thirst for the Nouveau has waned considerably in recent years. The origins of the Gris-Sablon estate date back to the early 1900s. Monsieur Besson, Dominique Morel's great-grandfather, moved to the town of Émerauge and was very much a man of his time. Besson was the inventor of the first filter press, and he also set up a distillery and a cooperage near the small 2-hectare vineyard. The estate now covers 18 hectares and produces wines from 12 different appellations, with Chardonnay-based Beaujolais Blanc being the most recent addition. My cheese pairing is Camembert. Camembert was reputedly first made in 1791 by Marie Harel, a farmer from Normandy, following advice from a priest who came from Brie. True AOC, or Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée Camembert, is only applicable if produced using raw, unpasteurised milk, utilising the same process as Marie Harel. There are many lesser camemberts produced from pasteurised milk, and when young, can be quite a bland tasting experience. My reasoning for pairing a top-quality camembert with a Fleurie is down to the soft tannins in the wine. Harsh tannins fight with cheese, so the fruity softness of the Fleurie pairs with the earthy richness of the camembert to make a delicious combination.
So, moving on to our fourth wine. This is a Fleurie. Now, Fleurie, extremely well known, but unfortunately it gets that sort of stuck with a reputation because of Beaujolais, particularly Beaujolais Nouveau. That area, Beaujolais, Fleurie, Morgan, Moulin-à-Vent, Syrad, all those sort of really lovely wines made from the Gamay grape are often tarred with this image that we have of being sort of very light, not brilliant, and actually it's not true. The Beaujolais crus, of which Fleurie is one of them, can produce and have been producing over the last few years some really stunning wines. So what we have here is the Fleurie from Domaine Gris-Sablon. And I think straight away, 100% Gamay, you can see the colour. It's a lovely, vibrant, purpley red, so distinctive of the Gamay grape, and showing its youth, but to me it's a very attractive, pretty sort of, say, purpley red. So, on the nose first of all, and I think you can serve this very sort of lightly chilled, but nose-wise, to me, it's vibrant, it's fresh, lovely sort of strawberry, cherry, raspberry fruit oozes through on the nose. First of all, and then palate-wise, lovely, clean, juicy strawberry raspberry fruit again. Nice texture, not too tannic, and this is one of the things about the Gamay grape. It's low in tannin and produces these sort of lovely, fresh, fruity, slightly floral wines. Very easy drinking, relatively low in tannin. Makes some great, very versatile wines, and this is really drinking beautifully. Still has structure, has a little bit of weight, lovely length, lovely finish. Now, as far as cheese is concerned, first of all, I think it's going to go perfectly with a little mouthful of Camembert. Now, Camembert even is quite distinctive. This is a lovely farmhouse example, lovely flavours, lovely richness, but the acidity, and this is the key thing once again, and this is a theme that's coming through and through every time with the wines and the cheeses, is the acidity is cutting through that cheese, the richness of the cheese, making for a really super combination. And I think tannin is a great enemy of cheese, and because this is relatively low, it works well with this. Now, food-wise, lightly chilled, relatively low tannin. I actually think this could be a great fish partner. So what I'm thinking, seared tuna, first of all. So the freshest tuna you can get, just seared lightly on both sides. Keep it a little bit uncooked just in the middle. I think it'd be absolutely super, accompanied by a panzanella salad. So very traditional Italian dish. So some slightly 1 day, 2 day old bread mixed with tomatoes and various other herbs. So you get this sort of lovely freshness, which A will go with wine, B goes really well with tuna. So a lovely combination. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next wine. So this is the opportunity to pause now, keep on drinking the wine, have a nibble of cheese, and we'll now press on with the next tasting.
Bordeaux is another French wine region that barely needs an introduction. Famed for its red wines of the Médoc, Saint-Emilion and Pomerol, dry whites from Passat-Léognan, as well as the luscious sweet whites of Barsac and Sautereau, Bordeaux is seen by many as the epitome of fine wine. And yet the beating heart of the region is made up of thousands of small estates and growers, making predominantly everyday drinking wine. Over 70% of all Bordeaux wine sells for between 3 and 15 euros, and the region is the biggest producer of AOC or quality wine in France, and second only to Languedoc-Roussillon in terms of hectares planted. With a surface area of 49 hectares, Chateau is the oldest and most important property of the Compagnet family. A typical vintage of the Chateau is 55% Cabernet Sauvignon and 45% Merlot, with the wine spending 12 months in oak, 25% of which is new. Chateau was classified in 2003 as a Cru Bourgeois and is a member of the Cru Bourgeois Alliance. This system sits just below the 1855 Grand Cru classification and represents a significant echelon of high-quality Bordeaux wines. Cheese-wise, Comté is my suggestion. Comté is produced in the Jura Massif region of eastern France. The unpasteurized cow's milk used is mainly from Montbéliard or French Simmental cattle. This hard-mounted cheese is matured to perfection in cool, dark caves where the cheese gets its unique taste, texture and colour. There are several maturing cellars in the region where Comté is ripened for a minimum of 4 months and as long as 18, 24 or even 36 months. Comté was one of the first cheeses to receive an AOC status in 1958 and is one of the most popular cheeses in France with around 40,000 tonnes of annual production. With the soft tannins and ripe fruitiness of the Chateau, this is a great pairing.
Our fifth wine of the tasting this month is from Bordeaux, the hallowed vineyards of Bordeaux. And this is Chateau 2015 from the Medoc on the left bank of the river. And first of all, colour-wise, again, it's bright, vibrant, deeper than the Fleurie, is 100% Gamay, whereas this is 55% Cabernet Sauvignon, 45% Merlot, and you can see the extra depth of colour straight away. Still showing little hint of brightness, a hint of purple almost, showing the youth. But first of all, on the nose. Now, lovely, vibrant blackcurrant fruit, quite plummy as well. So there's a softness, there's an intensity of fruit. Perhaps a little hint of cigar box or cedar wood also coming through, but the effect of the oak has had 12 months in barrels, 25% of which were new, and that's very judicious use. So you're just getting a little hint of that vanilla, but it's not overblown, it's not overpowering. It's really letting the fruit express itself. Okay, let's move on to the palate. Lovely weight, lovely intensity, and I think 2015, we're nearly 5 years old. It's the tannins have really softened, so we're getting this lovely mix of vibrant fresh fruit, a little bit of development, so it's not too punchy. The tannins have softened and integrated within that fruit. There's good acidity, it keeps it balanced, and again the oak is not overpowering. It's just giving a little bit of structure in the background. Lovely weight, lovely length, lovely intensity, but not super strong. So a lovely mouthful of claret. It's a beautiful, easy drinking but well-made, structured Bordeaux. And straight away, what am I thinking? Cheese-wise, a classic. This will go beautifully with a little piece of Comté, which I happen to have here, and the intensity of the Comté just marries harmoniously again with the evolved tannins. And I think this is important particularly with hard or semi-hard cheeses, is that the tannins don't need to be too austere. You need a bit of tannin development, just to marry harmoniously with the cheese. Food-wise, I think what would go perfectly with this would be a slow-cooked beef en daube, or in the UK terms, perhaps a beef casserole. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next wine. So this is the opportunity to pause now, keep on drinking the wine, have a nibble of cheese, and we'll now press on with the next tasting.
Situated 130 kilometres east of Bordeaux, Montbazillac is an AOC appellation for sweet wines, made in an area in the wider region of Bergerac in southwestern France. It is not as famous nor as expensive as their neighbours from Sautereau, yet Montbazillac still ranks as one of France's better-known sweet white wines. They are produced from Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc and Muscadel grapes, which are affected by noble rot. Despite receiving its AOC status in 1936, Montbazillac has always been in the shadow of the more famous Sautereau, and it took a concerted push by growers in the mid-1990s to restore its reputation. At their best, Montbazillac wines can be stunningly intense and unctuous. Domaine L'Ancienne Cure is currently run by the fifth generation Christian Roche, who took over in 1984 and began developing the estate, converting to organic viticulture and expanding the range of wines made. The estate is regarded as one of the leading Montbazillac producers. The blend in this cuvée is 90% Semillon and 10% Muscadel, and the grapes were hand harvested with the emphasis on selecting the best botrytized berries. As with any good dessert wine, the sweetness is balanced by the clean, fresh acidity that stops it from being cloying. As far as cheese is concerned, I have paired a Bleu d'Auvergne with the Montbazillac. Bleu d'Auvergne is a French blue cheese named after its place of origin in the Auvergne region of south-central France. The cheese can be made from raw or pasteurized milk and is sometimes attributed as cow's milk version of Roquefort, which is made of ewe's milk. It is lighter and creamier than Roquefort and was awarded AOC status in 1975 and is produced on both an industrial scale as well as by artisan creameries. The Penicillium roqueforti gives the cheese its typical bluish-green veins. It's aged for a minimum of 4 weeks, by which time the cheese shows its assertive flavours and smooth texture. This is ideal with this particular Montbazillac, as the medium sweetness of the wine harmonises with the moderately intense, salty creaminess of the cheese. A Roquefort, I feel, would be too strong.
So, our final wine in our tasting is from Montbazillac. Now, Montbazillac, very well known, many people will have visited it, has a lovely chateau situated in the town or the village itself, but it's renowned for its sweet wines. And Montbazillac produces a range of reasonably sweet, quite sweet, through to really unctuously sweet. And just like Sautereau, the reason that you get this sweetness is through the picking of varying levels of botrytized or nobly rotted grapes. So what we have here, this is the Domaine L'Ancienne Cure, and very well-known estate, famous for their Montbazillac. And this is what they call their cuvée Jour de Fruits. And it's characterized by being a medium gold. It's not as deeply rich as perhaps some of the more intense, sweeter versions. But on the nose, first of all, lovely apricot fruit, a little bit of nuts, definitely a bit honeyed, but it's not super intense. It's not super sweet on the nose. So I would be describing this as medium sweet as opposed to very sweet. Just from the nose alone, but it's honeyed, it's rich, it's lovely sort of development and complexity, very, very attractive on the nose first of all. Then palate-wise, now this is the key with good quality dessert wine, is you need really nice racy acidity that cuts through the sweetness, prevents the wine from being sticky or cloying. And I think this is delivering exactly that. So it feels fresh, it feels intense, obviously sweet, but not super sweet, not really sticky. And that acidity is just keeping it fresh. It's keeping it, you're getting a nice, clean, sweet finish, but it's not cloying. It's not, it's not heavy. And so straight away, I think this lends itself a lot of versatility with this style of wine. This could easily be an aperitif, a little sort of savoury cheese nibble. I think a little savoury cheesy pastry. I think would go absolutely beautifully with this. It would also go with some light pâtés as well, maybe the first course. But cheese-wise, two options really with this. I'm recommending either a Bleu d'Auvergne. Now, Bleu d'Auvergne, very famous, very well-known blue cheese, not too strong, not too heavy. And I've got a little piece here. And I think harmoniously, balanced, works really well. The blue cheese is not too intense. The wine's not too intense. So it's a lovely mix. It's a lovely pairing. Whereas alternatively, you go a little bit of Roquefort, famous Roquefort, much more intense, ewe's milk, much stronger blue experience here, much more pungent, much more intense. And I think the initial burst of sweetness works really well, but then the intensity of the Roquefort just sort of charges through and starts to dominate at the end. So I think of the two, Bleu d'Auvergne, Roquefort, the Bleu d'Auvergne just wins through as being the optimal match with this. As far as dessert is concerned, well, lots of options, but I'm plumping for a cinnamon spiced pear tartare. Those caramelized flavors, the lovely acidity of the pears, I think would be absolutely perfect with this. Okay, so that's the end of our third video tasting, the classic wines of France. As you might imagine, we've had great fun making it, and I'd like to pay special thanks to Julia, who has put an awful lot of work once again into the creation of the video. So I look forward to seeing you all next month, either online or hopefully, if things ease up, face to face for a tasting, but who knows. Thank you.